Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Today we are continuing our discussion on innovation by focusing on innovation in the workplace. Generally, we think of innovation or being innovative as being some kind of gift from the gods, an ephemeral phenomenon that just happens on the odd occasion. However, my guest today thinks there is more to being innovative than just sitting and waiting to be inspired. Moreover, organizations in particular can foster innovation in a sustainable way. Joining me today is Lorenzo Hodges, founder and CEO of Plain White Table, an innovation strategy and capacity development firm based in Trinidad and Tobago. Lorenzo, welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michelle, and welcome to everybody else. Glad to be on.
Okay, so let's just jump in. Lorenzo, tell me more about Plain White Table. Why that name and why you decided to start such a business?
Plain White Table is a name that honestly came to me one day. I was minding my business and I think I was driving at the time. And the exact phrase popped into my mind. And in that moment, I knew that it was meaningful to whatever I had to build going forward. And that became the name of the company. At the core of the name, really, Plain White Table is really about a pure platform upon which ideas can be birthed. That's how we describe it. Ideas have to be crafted in the right environment. And so if you can ignore the past, ignore whatever agendas you may have, ignore any past failures and even past successes, and look to the future with real innocence, but also with a sense of inquiry about what can we discover about what's next and how do we create it. It actually changes the way in which you create anything. And I think that's the place upon which real innovation happens, where the agenda is really future focused. How do you impact people's lives in a meaningful way by discovering new things, new tools, new solutions that can enhance life? And so that's really at the core of the Plain White Table name.
Okay.
Of course, I should add with it is the notion of collaboration, being able to bring your ideas to the table and gather around the table so that we share in the process of discovery. It's not just about one person or an individual or a star. It really is about a team.
Understood. Now, you said, you're minding your own business and this name came to you. But how then, and you knew that the name was significant, but then how and why did you start the business?
The business is something that essentially was on my heart for some time. I've started several businesses over the years, but in terms of Plain White Table, really I saw a space and a need that really is being unmet inside of the Caribbean space. I've been operating in the space of innovation for the last 20 years or more, very actively, playing many different roles over the years throughout my career. And what I found is in interacting with customers, there was always a challenge inside of organizations with how do they innovate. I worked for 15 years at Telesystems, which I personally think is one of, if not the most innovative companies in the Caribbean and possibly the world. We could debate it some other time. But I worked there for 15 years and I saw firsthand what innovation was like, because it was an environment in which innovation thrived every day. It's something that was just a part of the culture and a part of the way of life inside of Telus. But when I interfaced with customers, I noted that when we brought ideas to them, there was a response that they would have. In many cases, there will be obstacles. There will be just different things, from their team dynamics to the culture that they have to the bureaucracy that exists on that end to many different things, both at the executive level as well as lower levels throughout the organization. There'll be something blocking innovation from occurring that sometimes prevented us from bringing our really meaningful solutions to them. And so I thought, how do we enable companies to do that. And I found that there are other companies abroad in other spaces where innovation consultancy and design firms and so on function really well and help to build the innovation capacity in organizations. And so we started Plain White Table with a view to increasing the innovation capacity inside of organizations. And that means to enable companies for themselves to begin to think about how do you craft your own environment, your own internal culture, leadership, and all of the mechanisms that can, in fact, allow innovation to thrive inside of your organization. I think there's a significant space for it in the Caribbean, particularly because I think, unfortunately, we have some myths that seems to prevail in the Caribbean, and you can tell me if you've experienced this yourself, Michelle. Okay. To me, across the Caribbean, there's this notion, one, that foreign is better. Right? I'm not sure what the genesis is. I think there may be some deep-rooted things from our historical beginnings, potentially. Right? There's this notion that foreign is better, and foreign is good, but it is not necessarily better. I don't agree that it is definitively better. And with that, there's a notion of this almost small island mentality, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but small island mentality in the sense that we are in this very small space and other people need to solve our problems for us. Other people need to bring the solutions for us. And the resultant effect of it is a net disposition towards importing innovation instead of exporting innovation. That being the case, it means that there is room for our companies and our organizations and even our governments to begin to create more things. When we talk about diversifying our economies, a lot of that can happen at the firm level. And so companies have to begin to think about how do we begin to create stuff that is valuable to us, but that is also valuable to the world. So we help to play a role in defining what global means and what a global standard looks like, that we don't have to inherit global standards from abroad. We can, in fact, set global standards from within our Caribbean domain and do it very well. And I'm happy to say that in my time at Telios, those words about setting a global standard and building a global platform were not words that mocked us. They were words that we felt very comfortable using and words that we walked in and lived by. And so there are, like Telios, there are other examples within the Caribbean with firms that are building things that are globally relevant, building things that can stand up to the global standard. And I think from a mentality shift standpoint, we can make that jump, but a significant part of it has to start within our companies where we have resources, we have teams, and we can begin to empower and enable our staff and our teams to really solve problems that can actually be beneficial to us in terms of revenues and sales and so on, not just by selling within our Caribbean markets. We can, in fact, create things that can be sold way beyond our shores.
Absolutely. But one of the things, I guess, as much as you mentioned about myths and misconceptions, is that if we're waiting for innovation, there can be a sense that you sit down and just wait to be inspired. And from what I gather, to Plain White Table, you are suggesting that there is a way that we can somehow systematize innovation within an organization. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Innovation is about productivity, right? It's about producing something. It's about creating something. It's about creating something that's new, that's relevant, that's different, creating something that's remarkable. And whilst there is a creative element to that, because very often when people hear the word innovation, they immediately think that innovation is equal to creativity. And that's not necessarily so. Okay, creativity is important. It's a good skill to have. It's a good element that has to be infused inside of your innovation process. But creativity is not it all. What we have let me say it differently. I am yet to meet a company within which there are no talented creative people. I think it is fair to say that in all companies, there are talented and creative people.
Yes.
So having creativity is not the only element to ensure that there's innovation. I think it's an important part. The challenge is that we have creative and talented people working inside of firms that don't give them avenues to express their creativity in a structured, systematized way so that their ideas could be really converted into something real. All right, that's the problem there. So you need to have a process, and you can, in fact, have a very clear process that allows you to take seed ideas, early stage ideas, and convert them into something material. You can have processes that would allow you to not just have those ideas, but to arrive at new ideas and the best ideas and quickly validate those ideas. You can teach your teams methods for creative problem solving. We use design thinking and have our own modified approach to design thinking that we use for arriving at rich ideas that would generally be past your own biases. And a lot of times, ideas that people come up with are limited to what they've been exposed to. And so there are, again, processes that you can use that will allow you to think beyond whatever your current frame of thinking is. So you can systematize the way in which you go about idea generation or the ideation process. And you could systematize the way in which you go about validating those ideas and then building and testing versions of those ideas and creating prototypes for them. And in many cases, you can do that rapidly. And then eventually get to the place where you can convert that into something that has some longer term platform, whether it is a real product or a real service or a combination thereof, or a new way of doing things. So innovation could be from your product and customer facing side, but you could also have inside of your human resources department, they can have their own innovation process. How do we go about creating better employee engagement? That's an interesting problem that I know all HR managers and HR leaders and executives want to solve. Mm-hmm. Well, you can have innovation inside of there. Innovation doesn't just have to be restricted to your marketing and sales and product development team. You can have HR teams sitting in a very creative context with a defined process for how do we firstly deeply understand the problems that our staff has. And that's arriving at a place of empathy, which we can talk about a bit later maybe. Mm-hmm. Arriving at a real place of empathy, having a deep sense of the needs of the stakeholders that you're trying to create a solution for. And then determining, okay, if these are their deep needs, and we're now seeing things we had not considered before, what new ideas and what new insights come out of that understanding? And with those new insights, how do we then take that as a new premium thing that we have? Insights are valuable and priceless. How do we take these new insights and embed them into a process that allows us to arrive at a really new way to engage our employees? And I'm just using that as one example. Right. But that same thinking and process could be modeled for any function in an organization. Your CFOs have to have their own process and for innovation, without of course breaking the all of the accounting standards and finance standards and so on. I'm not dealing with anything with respect to business under the table and cooking the books and we're not dealing with anything unethical. I'm dealing with staying within the ethical confines and regulations that you have, that you can take those as simply boundaries and parameters within which you innovate, but then you begin, while staying lawful, to design, okay, this is how we're going to approach these things. CFOs have to be thinking about, how do we fund innovation? What's the way in which we finance it? What's the role that we play? Not just how do we ensure that the business is being run efficiently and we're covering our costs and we're profitable, but how do we invest in the new thing? How do we take some portion of the funds to propel business for the future, which may have nothing to do with today's business? CEOs have to think in the same way. In HR, they have to be thinking, how do we incentivize innovation? How do we design our performance management system to support innovation in a real way so that staff, when they work, can feel a sense of accomplishment that, yeah, when I bring my ideas to the table and when I solve new and interesting problems, that actually is in fact captured in our performance management system. Unfortunately, Michelle, right now what happens is in many firms, we are so focused on today's business. And when I say today's business, I mean whatever your core business is, the one that you have all of the systems in place for.
Right.
Sales is focused on generating revenue for this specific product set. Marketing, likewise. And everything else in the business is configured or optimized for today's business. Businesses run very well there, and we have really, really good performing firms within the region that are good at that. Right? They operate well. But the whole issue of how do we prepare for a dynamic, unpredictable future by innovation, by creating new revenue streams to deal with new markets, to building new business models that will allow us to be relevant 5 years from now and effective 5 years from now, so that our revenues don't get depleted by competition, that our current business model doesn't get disrupted by some new technology upstart in our industry that we just never saw coming. All right, we have to be thinking about how do we build those components of the business, and you can put structures in there. Again, I'm going very broad just to answer the case that innovation absolutely can be systematized. There are many blocks that we can dissect across an organization at the most strategic level, and then of course all the way down into the functional teams that can allow you to set a business on a very clear track of converting ideas into real outcomes that produce value for your key stakeholders in the end.
Okay. So currently, what services does Plain White Table offer, and who are accessing those services? Okay.
So we have 3 main business areas. Actually 4. I'll tell you about the 4th one a bit later. So the first is really our innovation capacity development services, which is where we go into firms, starting with the executive teams, to talk about how do you embed innovation into your strategy and into your strategy formulation process. So not just the output of your strategic planning, but how do you, even in your strategic planning process, how do you become innovative even in that process, the way you go about it, that you can bring richer insights and richer considerations into the strategy formulation process. And then we walk through and work through what needs to be done from a leadership enablement, people enablement standpoint, but also what about your processes and systems and structures that you can put in place in order to support innovation and eliminate the obstacles to innovation. Ultimately, until you get to the place where innovation really becomes very native and organic to the operations of the business. So that's our innovation capacity development service. That includes training and other kinds of interventions as a whole. The other block, the second would be experience design, which is a significant and growing part of our work, where we help organizations to think through how do you design delightful experiences for customers. A lot of companies right now are very focused on customer service, and customer service is good, but customer service is not enough.
Right.
And our whole philosophy around it needs to shift from the issue of service to experience. Service is a very good word, just to be clear. I think service is important just from a lifestyle standpoint. We have to learn to serve people. So I'm not saying service from that standpoint. I'm saying experience from the customer standpoint. A customer does not care about you in reality. They
Right.
care about what you can provide for them and how best can you provide it for them. Customers want to be delighted. And so we help companies to discover the gaps in the experience that they currently deliver and to innovate on the experience. And that's across the board. My background is in technology, but it's not technology focused. It's really about the wider experience. So that can, in fact, include digital considerations, face-to-face, brick and mortar, physical structure type considerations, like even the layout of a space and how do you enhance the dynamics of a space to allow for the right flow of people.
Right.
But also, what about the background processes and some of the invisible things that have to support what the customer will ultimately be exposed to and what they will experience. Customers need to have delightful experiences from when they first hear about your company all the way through to where they are active, regular, and habitual consumers of whatever service and product that you're offering. So we help companies to think through that. That's the second block. The third one is product design and service design. That's new product design and new service design. Finding ways in which to add to your existing portfolio or completely transform your existing portfolio of products. So even in speaking to the industries that you asked about, the industries that we work in or the areas that we work in, we currently touch finance, and that includes banking, insurance, and other financial services. We touch healthcare. Just last year, we actually did a really interesting project inside of the eyewear industry, at the end of which one of the CEOs that we spoke to said, quote unquote, "This is revolutionary." And this is someone who has been in the industry for 15 plus years in a senior role. And we brought to them the ability to see things they had not seen before using our techniques that we think, if we continue to work forward, can in fact revolutionize the industry. A lot of these projects are very private and under the radar. Mm-hmm. But that's healthcare and eyewear. We in manufacturing and food services. We in education. We in agriculture, and we have a couple of ICT clients as well. So we touch a decent spread of organizations, both
right.
in product oriented and service oriented companies. But a good example is if you look at the finance industry, for example, what you find is very homogeneous products.
Yes.
You go to a bank and you compare 10 banks, and really the difference between their products are the brand names, mm-hmm. or the names of the products, right? You might have subtle interest rate differences, very subtle differences in the terms that you may agree to, very, very subtle, but there's very little differentiation. And so whilst I appreciate that, and I'm happy because they all are doing very well, and this applies for many businesses across the board. I have no problem with banks or insurance companies or anything like that. But from my perspective, I think about customers and I think, are you offering things that meets all of your customers' needs? And how do you begin to differentiate yourself? So those are really good industries within which new product development and new service development could find life, where you can find new niches to serve unmet needs that customers have, and we work with organizations to begin to discover where the gaps are, and then to move forward by designing the new products and services that we will validate as being things that customers would really need, and then move forward into products and services that can be commercialized. So those are the three blocks: innovation, capacity development, experience design, and new product and new service development. The fourth block really is a wild card. When I say it's a wild card, plain white table, we develop our own products and services as well. Mm. And I'm not dealing with those that I described before. As an example, in the eyewear industry, we actually have 10 product prototypes that we can take forward and build into real solutions that may or may not carry the plain white table brand name, but there'll be products and services that could become businesses on their own.
Right.
Because, again, we have our own innovation lab. Last year, we ran a 7-week innovation training and internship program. It was fantastic. We hired 4 young engineering students from the University of the West Indies.
Right.
We taught them our methodology and our thinking, and we then went into one of the industries and did some really deep work, out of which we then developed some prototypes, and we're at a stage where we've had really good feedback about the prototypes, and we really just deciding how do we take them forward to make them into real products and services. So that's an example of that wildcard product development innovation lab part of our business.
Oh, excellent. So let me ask a question, because I'm glad that you all seem to be having a range of customers and industries that you're working with. But I would surmise that many companies think that they're sufficiently innovative. So I'm curious as to what demand for your services, or the services of Plain White Table, has been.
Yeah, I like that question. And the reality is that we dealing with a scenario where what we're offering is new. And I knew that going into it when I was resigning my job. So Plain White Table is about 5 years old, but I was working at a company for 15 years, as I said before, and then decided, you know what, this problem that I saw in a context where certainly in Trinidad and Tobago here, but it's not, there are similar things in other jurisdictions in the region, but in Trinidad and Tobago here, we were inside of a recession, and we needed to get to a place where our firms begin to diversify. The evidence is there just by looking at our foreign exchange challenges, that in some cases, some firms closed down because they couldn't attract, their business was dependent on spending a set of foreign exchange outward.
Yes.
Paying US dollars in order to import stuff into Trinidad. So there are some businesses that close because of that, and there are some that continue to have significant challenges today because they still can't access sufficient foreign exchange. So inside of that space, I felt all of the elements were there suggesting that we need to innovate and we need to diversify and go beyond just the rhetoric that we've had for decades, because the call to innovate and to diversify in Trinidad has been there for quite some time. But I felt this is the time. So I discern that the season is here for it. And at the end of 2017, I would have left my last job and focused on building Plain White Table full time. And we've been doing it. We did that throughout 2018. Inside of that time, we've had some good fortune, I would say. We've built some important relationships. I think as much as we could handle in a year, given we're a small team at this point in time, and we continue to grow as we need to based on projects. And fortunately, we've been able to also attract the right team members that we need from project to project. So we've been doing well at our scale. And let me be clear, at our scale, we've been doing well. Right. However, a significant truth is that there is still a lack of awareness of what innovation is in the region. Companies use it as a buzzword still. I look at many annual reports and I see the word mentioned. More and more companies are adding it to their list of values. Right? So, innovative and people-centered, and these are now really cool words, and I commend all the companies that have that, because I think that's an important shift. If those words and those values were not previously a part of your focus, your culture, and your operating system, and they are now part of it, then I think that's important, because you need to start having the words spoken, right, inside of your organization. It needs to be part of people's consciousness. However, when I look at the depth of meaning behind the words and the extent to which those things are embedded inside of organizations, I am not really sure yet that there is alignment between the values declared and the reality of the operations on the ground, the reality of the culture that exists within firms. And so I've been having some really good and honest conversations with leaders at the executive level, talking through, okay, so you say you're innovative. Tell me what your key performance indicators are that suggest that you are in fact innovative. What are the things that you have in place? What are the specific structures that you have in place? What was the last new product that you rolled out? What's your product development cycle like? When do you expect to launch your next product? How many products and services do you have in development now? What is your current plan for transforming your business model? Is your business model relevant? Are you geared right now towards dealing with millennials and that growing population, which when I looked at the numbers last year, the numbers are startling about the number of people within the age group from 15 to 40. And all of them are not millennials, so let me be clear, lest someone listening to your podcast says, but they aren't millennials. I'm not dealing with that. I'm saying 15 to 40. Those people in 5 years, your 15-year-olds, in 5 years will be in their first jobs, okay, and will have buying power in 5 years. That's not very far from now. The people who are on the higher end of that, who are 35 and 40, are in management positions already, and some are pressing towards senior level management, and you have some are already CEOs and so on, depending on the career path that they're on. These are people with significant buying power. That block is in Trinidad and Tobago. When you look at the statistics, that block is the largest, portion of the population, and that number is growing because the group that's younger, below that, is a substantial percentage of the population. So when you look at the trends, we have to be ready to deal with a very, very different market 5 years from now. So when I have these conversations, I discover that there are gaps. There are challenges that people are not necessarily aware of, and I appreciate that part of my role is to in fact educate. To really let people know, look, there is something called innovation. I know you know about innovation. I respect that you know about innovation. But let's take a deeper look at what innovation means for you. Let's look at how you can make this a more fundamental part of your strategy. And so it's that part of the process has been a slow process because, again, you have to educate. And it reminds me of the earlier days in Teluos. I remember when Teluos first launched SMS. Not first launched SMS. SMS had just launched globally, so it was a new technology altogether. And very early on, Teluos had an idea to build a platform to allow for broadcast distribution of messages, and in particular for use in a marketing context, like those text-to-win promotions, which up to a few years ago were still very popular. In the early days, Teluos was one of the main players, one of the pioneering players in the region, pushing SMS marketing campaigns and broadcast marketing and that sort of stuff. And at the time, when we spoke to marketers, they would say, yeah, but when we have vouchers, people, cut clippings out of the newspaper, and they put their information in, and then we collect it in a box. And then after 3 months, we manually go in there and we start sorting through the data to determine who the winner would be, and then manually keying in the information. And we were like, wow, okay, we can do that for you with an SMS. And we had to do a lot of work in just educating the public about what's possible with the new technology. And I feel, fast forward many years, the space that I'm in, I can appreciate those lessons from the earlier days in Teluos now, where I'm going out and having the conversations, and I trust that there will be more and more people like myself and like Plain White Table that would be having those conversations with executives to start stirring things up so that the appetite for innovation becomes more voracious, more substantial, right? That it moves from, again, just the buzzword that we can use towards something that we can measure and say, yeah, it has been done, and this is a track that we're on, and we're monitoring it, and we're seeing real returns from it. So it is early days in that regard, but I must say I'm pleased with what we've accomplished so far, and even more so for what we have learned so far, because we very much focus on the learning at this stage, and I think we'll always be focused on the learning. There's a lot that I am learning. There's a lot to be learned, and I'm loving the learning experience.
Oh, excellent. So that leads me to a question. What has been the biggest lesson you've had to learn so far?
The biggest lesson I've had to learn so far, I think there are many, and it's hard to pick one in particular. But if I'm to just pull one out of the heap, I think it really is a lesson about relationships. And learning to be slow in building relationships, right? Learning to be, again, because of what I just said about having to educate the market, I have my own perspective about what could be done and the potential and so on. But a big part of the learning over the last period has been just arriving at a deeper place of empathy about what are the considerations that executives have today. Mm-hmm. Right, really just learning that, really just discovering that. And I'm glad for last year, because whilst I had been having conversations and delivering training services even before that into organizations and for executives and so on, last year really taught me more and more about the deep considerations that CEOs and C-level people have about their companies. Our business leaders are very concerned about their people. Right. And very concerned about their organizations and how they perform, and very concerned about how sustainable they'll be, especially as times become more volatile and more unpredictable. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that worked in the past that allowed businesses to have tremendous success don't work as effectively today. For me, the learning was in how to have the conversation with them, how to allow a CEO to begin to share, these are my deep concerns.
Yes.
Because whilst they're corporate concerns, they're personal concerns, because that's his job.
Yes.
Right? And he has people who depend on him for their livelihood. Mm-hmm. So really just learning that and to slow down and to have a different regard. And I have high regard for all people. It's not about CEOs or janitors or middle management or supervisors or anything like that. It's not like CEOs are better than anybody else. I have deep respect for people as a whole, but because many of my conversations were focused on or really targeted at and with C-level people, it gave me a real new appreciation. And so that whole thing about how do you build relationship? How do you provide a different kind of support? How do you build confidence? How do you allay the fears of executives for them to begin to look past the current challenge and see that, there is a way that we can do this with the constraints that we have, that there is a way. We can find a way. There are know-how things that we can use and we can bring in. That relationship part, just the conversation part, huge learning for me.
Excellent. And definitely, I think certainly just being able to get a deeper appreciation as to, what people in business or in organizations are going through, especially those who are in leadership positions.
Yes.
And it certainly would enhance the types of solutions that you can bring to the table if there are honest conversations about, what keeps them up at night, what are their concerns, what they think they're doing well, etc., etc.
Certainly, yes, definitely.
I just want to ask, as we wind down, there's a question that I've been dying to ask. So, having been in the workforce for, 20 years or so, I think, I'm going to use a phrase that, you may find a little odd, but, I feel as if you're a mature entrepreneur. So, what has been some of the benefits and challenges of making such a transition?
To full-time entrepreneurship?
Yes, at this stage in your life as opposed to being 22.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one, Michelle. I remember when I'll give you a quick snapshot from when I first went into business, when I left my first job, one of my first jobs, and went into business temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in 2002.
Okay.
I was a trainer at a company called Bordercom International. I taught people how to do web design and e-commerce and that sort of stuff. It's in the early days of my career. And at the time I was single and I was living with my aunt. And so my notion of risk then, I'm single and I'm living with my aunt. I have somewhere to sleep. My aunt cooks and I could eat. And so, I didn't flinch when I
Exactly.
resigned
Mm-hmm.
to start that business with a couple of business partners. I didn't flinch. It was like, okay, sure, let's do it. Fast forward to now when I'm married and we have a mortgage, and the concerns are very, very different. And so it's the terms of life have changed significantly. As you said, has really matured a lot, and I've matured over the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so my perception of what risk is very different, because now any misstep on my part could derail the life that my wife and I share.
Right.
Right. And so it had to be a very carefully considered decision. And in fact, it took me a few years before discerning the time, because I think these things have to be discerned. I'm not one who is fascinated with entrepreneurship, to be honest. I'm not one who has a problem working for people. I have absolutely no problem with that.
Right.
I'm not one who always wanted to be my own boss. I don't particularly care whether I'm the boss or not. I'm always and have always been fascinated with solving interesting challenges.
Yes.
And so the vehicle that I choose to solve the challenge is where my choice is. And in this case, I felt that to tackle this set of problems, which is innovation capacity development in companies, that I had to build a business that can do that. I couldn't do it where I was before. I had to create the space for it. And so it was a necessary step. In terms of how it has been, I am glad for how it has been so far. And of course, there's been challenges. I mean, my wife and I have very deep and interesting conversations about what the future looks like,
Right.
and how do we build our home and build our family going forward, because there are real implications. But inside of it, there's a real sense of purpose. We both agreed that is something that this is something that we feel is divinely prescribed for us at this point in time. And so with it, we embrace the ups and the downs. We embrace the challenges, and they have been healthy challenges, because I had to learn how to shift from being employed where I'm given a directive, I'm given strategic directives, and whilst we had room to build on that, I was essentially, someone else was concerned about where the salaries and those things were coming from.
Right.
And I was given a mandate to, build these things. I was marketing manager, okay, build out the marketing. I was business development manager, build this out. I was the executive responsible for sales, okay, build these things out. And so strategy was formulated and I ran with it. And in this case, I had to learn, okay, how to slow down and spend even more time, because I'm the guy who now is primary driver of strategy.
Yes.
I'm the one who has to determine what structures need to put in place, and I'm not one who is particularly given to administration. And so I had to now build out an administrative component in the business,
Yes.
And grew up in that sense in very, very quickly inside of the last year. So those things for me honestly have been like painful lessons. Just the oh yeah, you have to send out an invoice and you have to track your expenses and track your revenues and be more deliberate about these things.
Yes.
You can't just be all caught up with getting the project done and keeping the customer happy. There are these back office things that have to be done. And so, it's a big jump. Entrepreneurship and business is way more than your craft and your talent. You could be a talented and skillful person in whatever area, HR, design, marketing, whatever the area is. You could be very talented in that, but a business has a life of its own. And so you have to go beyond just your talent and begin to acquire new sight and new understanding and new skills, because you're now building a business which has to take care of other people. So it's been a really interesting journey, and I say interesting not in the cliche way. I say interesting to mean that it really does fascinate me what I've learned so far in this entrepreneurship journey. And I have a lot more I can share about it, and I chat with people whenever I get the chance about it, and it's been really fruitful, really fruitful. I have no regrets, and there's a lot of purpose in it. So I'm focused on really accomplishing what I'm meant to, what I've been called to.
Excellent. So just my final question, I think, just to circle back to innovation and that discussion we have been having. And, based on just the fact that, as I had said earlier, and I think you agreed, that, companies might think they're being innovative, but whether or not they're truly being innovative might be certainly a matter of perspective. And I was wondering if you could share with us maybe 3 to 5 things that you would suggest an organization examines in order to determine its potential for innovation and probably where it's at currently.
Okay, sure. I think one of the primary things you have to start with is your culture, and that's directly related to the second thing, which is your leadership. So let me flip that and start with leadership, because leaders have a primary responsibility to define the culture of the organization. If innovation is not a part of your strategic conversations and not a part of your strategic focus, then it will not become part of the atmosphere of the company. It will not be put on the agenda of staff. Staff will continue to be focused on day-to-day operations, doing things that have been defined in the past, which they now have to just run and continue to operate as efficiently as possible. So it has to start with leadership, and I think leadership teams have to decidedly go after it. Right? It can't be done just casually. It can't just be an idea and let's try a thing, because what will happen is you'll have little sparks and it won't be sustainable innovation. It'll just be short-term wins that you will have. So leaders have to drive it, absolutely have to drive it. Your most creative people will be stifled if leaders don't create the space to activate your innovation champions across the organization. So leadership is the first thing. The second thing would be looking at your culture. And you can do an innovation culture assessment, and that's something we offer to firms, that you can assess your culture specifically for, does it have the attributes that support sustainable innovation?
Right.
Do we have an innovative culture, or do we have one that blocks innovation? Is our culture focused on efficiency, or is it focused on new value creation? Right? And I'm not dealing with just the words, because you may be, everybody is all about new value creation, but does your culture actually support new value creation across the spectrum?
Yes.
Right? Is it like that? And there are some key attributes that we'll assess against. And there are a couple of different tools that you can use, and we use them, so we can come in and actually do a thorough assessment. That would include feedback from executives and feedback from staff. Both feed into giving you a very clear picture of, do you have an innovative culture? So leadership and culture will be the first two. The next, I would say, is looking at what's your problem solving framework. Do you have a creative problem solving framework that allows for teams to gather openness of sharing of ideas and sharing of ideas in a generative way, meaning to get the most ideas possible before you converge on the specific ideas that you go after. And what I've found is in most firms, you really converge very quickly around a couple of ideas.
Right.
Very, very quickly. Some bright spark in the room says, let's do X, or the loudest person says it, or the most senior person says, let's do X, and then we all quickly converge around it and we run behind it. And so it really stifles the way in which new ideas come up, new ideas get discovered for solving problems. So getting that and putting that kind of problem solving framework and a good methodology, like design thinking as an example, that's one of them. There are a few that we use that when teams rally around it, and again, like I said before, this is HR can use it, marketing could use it, sales could use it, but even cross-functional teams that have members from all of those could use it to solve different problems. That allows you to always be generating rich ideas and validating them and so on. Those three, I think, if you can deal with those three, the first one is like critical.
Mm-hmm.
Because if leaders don't sign off, a boss comes in and says, what are you doing? Why did I not get this report on time? Well, I was working on a new way in which, hey, my deadline is at so and so time.
Yes.
Right? It's like, that's all it takes. And the whole creative process gets shut down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The new ideation and so on gets shut down. So leaders have to change their posture and their thinking and begin to support it and allow for higher levels of experimentation, allow for a new way in which failure is interpreted and appreciated,
mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a right way to fail that allows for learning to happen very quickly, and you can design that into your system. That we're going to quickly test ideas, find out which ones are going to fail in a cheap way, and then the ones that we know prove to be even more useful, we then advance those down the track. Leadership first, culture, that's a big one. Beyond the assessment, you have to then look at how do you take the key steps. And we're working with one customer right now, shifting all of the big blocks that would eventually allow for a more innovative culture in the organization over time. And then that third is, if you activate your teams with the right ways in which to solve problems, listen, across your company, innovation will become native to you. It'll become a sustainable thing because the thinking platforms of the organization would have shifted. Those would be my top three.
Excellent. Lorenzo, this has been just an excellent conversation. I am surprised that we have blown by the time already. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping that we can continue the discussion at a later date, because I do think that there were so many things that, based on what you were saying, that I wanted to ask more, that we could probably delve a little bit deeper, but the time at this point really did not allow us to do so.
I would love to chat again on any area that you would like to. Certainly, I'd be glad to be on again. And this was a pleasure for me. The questions you asked actually allowed me to reconsider some things and even settle in my mind on certain things. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Michelle.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.